Students, welcome to this session. In this semester, you have a subject Distributed Computing. Textbook name Distributed Computing Principles and Applications. Author name is MLU. Okay. So let us go to the first chapter, that is Introduction. Let us come to the definition. So early computing was performed on a single processor. It is called uniprocessor or monolithic computing. So it makes use of single CPU to execute one or more programs. So monolithic computing means makes use of single processor. Now distributed system. The definition is a distributed system is a collection of independent computers interconnected via network capable of collaborating on a task. Okay, so in this system independent computers are interconnected, and these processors or these resources can be used to perform a task. So now difference between monolithic and distributed computing is monolithic computing using only single CPU and distributed computing is using multiple computers via network. So computers are called independent if they do not share. Okay, computers are called independent if they do not share memory. Such computers are called loosely coupled computers, and distributed system is called tightly coupled system because in distributed computing computers are coupled or connected tightly. So what is loosely coupled computing? That is monolithic computing, where computers are not connected. It is loosely coupled computing. And tightly coupled computing, that is distributed computing, where computers are connected or interconnected tightly. So now network service and network application use distributed computing to perform network services and web-based applications. So what is a network service? Network service is service provided by a special kind of software known as a server on a network. Okay, network service is service provided by a software known as server. For example, www, FTP or email. See, all these things need network for communication, isn't it? So it is a network service. And one more is the network application. Network application is an application that runs on network computers for end users. For example, online shopping carts, chat rooms, or network games. Already you are using these such applications because these such applications run on networked computers, isn't it? So now the different forms of computing. It's a very important question. The first one is monolithic computing. Monolithic computing, what is that? Already you know monolithic computing means there we use single computer, isn't it? And resources are not connected. This is the simplest form of computing. A single computer such as a personal computer or PC is used for computing. The computer is not connected to any network, and it may use only those resources within its immediate access. That means the resources connected to that computer. Okay, so this is monolithic computing. So here the resources are not shared. Okay, so here in this type of computing, the computer is used by a single user at a time. So in this monolithic computing also multiple users can be engaged. That means the resources, a single resource can be shared among multiple users. That means the technique known as time sharing. Okay, using this time sharing technique, they can use under this monolithic computing also resources can be shared. How? Using a technique known as time sharing. So here they use mainframes, that means larger computers, and this mainframe is connected to different devices known as terminals. So these terminals use this mainframe for any resources. Okay, so mainframe is used as a resource. So this is about monolithic computing. What is that monolithic computing? Using a single computer using its own resources, and computers are not interconnected. And one more is, even the resource can be shared. How a single resource can be shared among multiple users, or these users are called multiple terminals. Okay, mainframe is a resource and terminals are the devices using this mainframe. Okay, there is one more uh, form of computing, that is distributed computing. Distributed computing, already you know what is distributed computing. Distributed computing is involves computing performed among multiple network connected computers, each of which has its own processor and other resources. So in distributed computing, computers are interconnected, and computers are interconnected, and the resources can be shared among interconnected computers. Okay, so for example, they are giving an example of local computer using remote computer. So how a local computer can use a remote computer? For example, World Wide Web is an example of this type of computing. In World Wide Web, for example, if you want to visit any web page, you are double clicking on your browser, such as Chrome or any other browser that is on your local computer, isn't it? You are double clicking your browser on your computer, that is local computer, but it shows a page of some remote computer, isn't it? So that is how you accessing the remote computer resources. Okay, so that is distributed computing. So here this diagram shows centralized computing versus distributed computing. So what is centralized computing? That is monolithic computing, only single computer and its own resources, isn't it? And computer is not connected to any network. See here in this centralized computing, this is a mainframe, that is a larger computer in size, a larger size, and some terminals are connected to this mainframe. So all these terminals are accessing the single mainframe. So that is centralized computing. And here the distributed computing. Distributed computing means computers are interconnected, and resources connected to that computers are accessed by all the computers, okay, connected to that network. So now there is a one more type of computing, that is parallel computing. So what is this parallel computing? Parallel computing is similar to this distributed computing but different from this distributed computing. Okay, parallel computing, that is so here it uses more than one processor simultaneously to execute a single program. See, a single program is using multiple CPUs to perform a single task. Okay, single program and multiple CPUs, multiple processors. So what is the result of this? It makes a program run faster. Okay, so parallel computing is performed on a single computer that has multiple CPUs. Okay, that is called parallel computing. So there is other type of computing, or other form of computing, that is cooperative computing. So what is this cooperative computing? That is, these are projects that parcel out large scale computing to workstations on internet host, making use of surplus CPU cycle. Okay, cooperative computing is performed to accomplish large scale projects such as some scientific projects. Okay, the examples are SETI. What is SETI? That is search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and otherwise distributed.net. Okay, search for extraterrestrial. What is extraterrestrial? That is space related programs. Okay, so that is scientific programs. So what is this cooperative? In this cooperative computing, interested computer owner will download a piece of software from websites. For example, websites such as SETI at home or distributed.net. So these are scientific websites. Okay, scientific websites to accomplish their projects, such as large scale scientific projects. They can use your CPU cycle. That means your CPU cycle. For that, your computer should be connected to the network, internet. Okay, your computer should be connected to the internet, and you need to download a software from such websites. And when your system is idle, your system cycle is used by these websites. Okay, your system is, your CPU cycle is used by these websites to accomplish their projects. If you install a software from their websites to your computer, so when your computer is idle, okay, then it should be connected to internet. So when your computer is idle, so your computer or your system CPU cycle is used by such projects. So this is called cooperative computing. So the different form of computing is in that 4 types. First one is monolithic computing, where a single CPU, single PC with its limited resources, and in that one concept comes, that is the time sharing. That is single mainframe is shared among the terminals. Next one is distributed computing. Distributed computing, that is the computers are interconnected and resources can be shared. There is one more, that is parallel computing. Under that, parallel computing is making use of multiple CPUs to accomplish single task. And one more, that is cooperative computing, using the surplus CPU cycles to accomplish large scale projects, isn't it? So now the next one is the strength and weaknesses of distributed computing. Even this is also an important question. Okay, so the first point is the strength of distributed computing, the affordability of computers and availability of access. Okay, affordability of computers and availability of network access. So internet, what is that? Internet has become universally available and generally affordable, isn't it? Now, so anyone can access internet. So 10-15 years ago the situation was not like this, but now it is universally available. And for distributed computers, distributed computers should be connected, making a community of distributed computing, isn't it? For distributed computing, computers should be connected, isn't it? Interconnected. So now it is very easy because we can access internet and easily. So computers are interconnected. So this is the strength or advantage of this distributed computing. There is one more, that is resource sharing. What is that resource sharing? In distributed, you know already, in distributed computing resources are shared, isn't it? For example, in an organization, each organization independently maintains computers and resources that are local to that organization, while sharing resources over network. In an organization, they can share their resources, isn't it? So that is what resource sharing is. So next one, scalability. That is, what is scalability? That is expanding, isn't it? Whether scalability is possible in this distributed computing? Yes. Okay, that is the available resources are limited to, in this monolithic computing, the resources are limited to one computer, the capacity of one computer. But in this distributed computing, the resources can be added, isn't it? Resources can be added or resources can be shared using network. So that is what scalability is. So now next one, the fault tolerance. Already you know what is fault tolerance. Fault tolerance is the tolerating the fault in case of failure. Okay, resources are mirrored or replicated. What is mirrored? That means replicated, that is taking a copy or having a backup copy. So backup copies can be kept. In case one system fails, the processing will not stop in this fault tolerance. Say in distributed computing, all the computers are interconnected, isn't it? All the computers are having its own resources. In this distributed computing, if at all one system fails, what happens? The entire processing will not stop. In case one system fails, the processing will not stop. It will use the resources of other computers connected to it. Okay, the processing will continue, and easily they can accomplish the task using the resource of other computer. Okay, because these resources are interconnected, so it can tolerate the fault. Okay, so these are the advantages of distributed computing. So first one is affordability of internet, that means internet is easily available. Resource sharing, scalability, that means adding more and more resources to the computer. And one more is fault tolerance, that is tolerating the fault. That means in case of failure, the processing should not be stopped, and processing should be continued by using the resources of other computers. Okay, so now we have even disadvantage in this distributed computing. See, what is the disadvantage here? Disadvantage is, first one, multiple points of failure. Multiple points of failure. So here, distributed computing depends upon network. Already you know, in distributed computing, computers are interconnected, isn't it? Since so multiple computers are involved, so all of which they depend on the network for communication. The failure of one or more computers may cause some problem, or the failure of network will result in what? The entire communication will be collapsed. Okay, there will be no communication at all. Multiple points of failure, because all the systems rely on the network connection. If at all the network connection is there, if any trouble happens, or if at all network connection fails, then it will result in a entire collapse. Okay, entire collapse in network communication. There will be no communication. Okay, there is the multiple points of failure. There is one more, security concerns. That means more opportunity for unauthorized access in internet. While using internet, there is a possibility. Okay, computers are very much prone to some unauthorized attacks, or in so this is called in centralized system. What is centralized system? Centralized system is monolithic computer. It is very easy to maintain these security policies, isn't it? One mainframe is there, it is centralized, and some other devices are connected to mainframe. It is easy to enforce some security concerns in monolithic or centralized. But here in distributed or decentralized, computers are interconnected, but it is difficult to implement and enforce security policies, and it is very much prone to virus attack. Okay, so these are the disadvantage of distributed computing. Okay.